good afternoon. I just cleared my throat at the very wrong moment. Good afternoon and welcome to Print Island and the Lighthouse. My name is Richard Askam. I am the Lighthouse Keeper. And I'm joined today by my twin that I didn't know I had until both of us decided to have the same haircut, same beard, and actually, do you know what? I'm going to go the whole hog and the same glasses. Good afternoon, Mathew Faulkner.
Good afternoon, Rich. Nice to see you.
Likewise, and it's an absolute pleasure for me to get you on to the Lighthouse today. You were actually, I'm going to take those off because I can't see the screen from this far, but you were there. You were in the room where it happened when Print Island was originally launched, and that was like about 8 years ago, wasn't it?
Yes, yeah, I remember it well at the event in the Brussels Car Museum, and I think
That's right.
I really enjoyed that session because I think one of the things I still remember was this concept, and I think the same applies to every industry, is that industries are very good at talking to themselves and thinking about, and perhaps focusing on some of the negative aspects about business that's declining in certain areas, or what should we do about this impact or this driver of change that we can't, on the face of it, do something about. And I think for me, it was really refreshing to hear the view that you can. There's actually a kind of a broader view off the island, outside on the continent somewhere, where if it's just a change of perspective. I think to me, what triggered me and what I remember was that, and again, it's the same for every industry, but that change of perspective can be really helpful in terms of seeing outside, putting yourself in your customers' shoes, and actually having a slightly different viewpoint. Which, but I remember it well. It seems like a long time ago now.
It does seem like a long time ago, and I remember when I was putting it together as a speech. And this is for those of you watching this for the first time. Print Island started off as a speech. It was called "The Amazing Adventures on Print Island," and I sort of landed on that, Matt, after about a year, 18 months of speaking in the industry. And I'm a latecomer to the world of print, but it was very evident to me how incredibly clever, incredibly innovative, incredibly hardworking, incredibly collaborative everybody I've ever met anywhere in the world of print is. But the one thing that they all share in common is they're not brilliant at communicating how good they are. And this whole concept of Print Island came from, right, well, I'm gonna poke you in the chest a little bit and say, look, come on, you're brilliant at what you do, and you think you're talking to everybody, but you're not. You're just talking to yourselves. And I agree with you about it's not unique to the print industry, but it just seems to be still, here we are 8 years on, and one of the reasons for bringing Print Island back as a YouTube content subscription channel is that debate still needs to be had, because I don't know about you, but I don't think it's changed all that much, has it?
No, I think you're right, and I think we're very fortunate to be in an industry that is very old. It's hundreds of years old as a print industry. My dad was a printer, and I got into print through a family that family line, if you like. And I've always worked in print. Started in manufacturing businesses before moving over to technology. But I heard a few years ago one of our customers from a big print business talk about, it was along the similar lines of this inward thinking or inward focus. And he said that print has this, sometimes an industrial inferiority complex, in that on the outside of print, but also on the inside, I think people often assume it's an old industry, it's big machines with oily gears, and it's kind of dirty factories. But actually, we all know that print has something for almost anybody. So for young people today coming into the industry, it's got cutting edge imaging technologies, it's got robots, it's got automation and software, and you can't escape artificial intelligence in every conversation. It's got creativity, it's got, but also manufacturing and production as well. So I think it's such an incredibly vibrant and diverse and interesting industry that is also constantly evolving. So as brands need to do things differently, to connect with their customers, print is still perfectly placed alongside, digital methods to be that connector and that. And I think, I think it's really important to always have that outside view. And I think young people looking inside print should be able to see something that is a really exciting, forward-thinking, forward-looking, technology-driven business.
I think that's a really interesting point, and I've said this from stage a few times over the last 2 or 3 years that the print industry is actually the tech industry. It just doesn't know it, or if it knows it, it's not prepared to admit it. Seems like the wrong word because it feels like it's a dirty topic, and it really isn't. It's everything that you just said about the technological evolution that's happened over the last probably 25 years across the industry is almost masked from the world because of that legacy history. And it would be the same as the motor industry, which has similar sort of issues, although it's not as scared to talk about itself. It would be like the motor industry developing a new electric car, but only ever talking about Henry Ford's, that's look what we did 1,000 years ago, sort of thing. And it's always struck me, Matt, that you've got this brilliant story to tell as an industry, but nobody, it seems, prepared to tell it externally. And I don't know how we solve that.
It's interesting because I'm part of the Independent Print Industries Association in the UK, so we're one of the trade organisations, and I also support a FESPA partner committee. So exhibitors of FESPA get together once a year and talk about, actually facilitated by FESPA, which is really strong. And we talk about where's the industry going, how can we drive change, how should we try and be perceived differently externally. And what I really enjoy about those sessions with those different organizations is, yes, there are always competitors in the room. There could be PSPs or there could be technology manufacturers like Canon, and our peers from the industry. But in those moments, there's an incredible brotherhood and sisterhood, if you like, in a sense of, yes, we're competitors, but we all realize that it's an amazing industry, it's vibrant. How do we together make the pie bigger so that we can all have a bigger slice? And I think there is a great spirit in the print industry that, I think somehow, and I don't know what the answer is instantly, but somehow we need to kind of continue that spirit and all think about how we move forward. Yes, we all need to develop our businesses individually, but there's definitely the pie can get bigger, and everyone's slice of that can be bigger as well.
It's interesting you put it that way, because that's the collaboration that you just highlighted that I spotted coming into the industry in 2016. Off the back of the work that I did with Share a Coke, it was the first thing that I noticed was how willing everybody was to collaborate with each other, competitor or otherwise. And I appreciate some of that IP is sensitive, and so there's collaboration to a point. I get that, but it's a little bit like Formula One, isn't it? Where they all share the same transport, they all share the same. There's lots of elements that they all work together with, but they're still competitive and they still race, and there's winners and losers. But maybe the answer to the question, how does the print industry tell the world what it's good at? Maybe the print industry needs its own PR agency.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea. Definitely. I think you're right about the collaboration, because we all have that vested interest in the whole thing moving forward, adapting, taking on all the headwinds that come. And it's the same. I mean, perhaps it's an element of getting older, but when you're young in an industry, you're kind of a passenger, learning and riding the wave and listening to your colleagues who've been there for a while. But I think as you get older, you start to see, how can we steer this? How can we kind of steer this together? And I think organizations like Canon and some of the big print companies, whether they're online printers or the other kind of big manufacturers in each country, I think we all have a kind of responsibility to ourselves and the industry and our peers and the upcoming generations to really do something that helps that continuation and development. So I'm not sure I know a single PR agency that's maybe big enough for the entire global print industry, but it's a nice thought.
Yeah, well, there's a business idea in that. Let's note that one down for future use. And you'll have noticed, eagle-eye viewers and listeners, that Mathew has mentioned Canon twice now. That's brilliantly done. I see what you did there. Maybe I'll go back and ask you, Mr. Faulkner, to introduce yourself and your role and your employer, and then we won't necessarily talk about them as a business, but I think it might just be good for context for the viewers to understand who the hell you actually are.
Yeah, of course. Well, I mentioned that I've always worked in print. I started off in print manufacturing. I think probably in the early days of one of the first digital transformations, where plate making was going digital. Some of the very first Apple Macs in reprographic studios. And as a young guy, he knows computers, then you can go and work in the studio. And from there, I transitioned to work for technology companies at the time, which were transitioning from traditional plate making into digital reprographics. And I stayed in technology. I joined Canon 13 years ago in the wide format business. So I work in the part of Canon that is the production print business. So everything from cut sheet toner and continuous feed and cut sheet inkjet technologies that are transitioning analog print volumes to digital. But my focus is in the wide format area. So technologies that cover everything from flatbed printing for signage and display to roll-to-roll printing and printing for photo and fine art as well. So I'm head of marketing for that part of the business for EMEA.
So print was your way in, tech was your landing point. Tech, print tech is your sort of your happy place. And I guess that sort of is my point about the print industry is the tech industry and the tech industry, the print industry. There's a very narrow line now. In fact, it's probably invisible, really, between the two things, isn't there?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's incredible innovation in the industry, both in terms of the technology. But I think when I, as a marketeer, think about how are we helping our customers, how are we helping our customers, we think about print as insights driven. So there's always change in a market, whether that is, a shift to digital, whether it's brands needing to connect in different ways, whether it's changes from new generations and changes in the way consumers are behaving or changes in work and home practices. So we always think about talking about industry insights and therefore challenges and the opportunities that change is bringing. Then we also think about the applications. What can we actually print that services some of those opportunities and how? And that's where some of the technology comes in as well, in terms of the advantages of digital print to be able to create the print of one or mass customization and personalization to be able to be measured within a campaign very effectively. So attribution is no longer a problem. The ability of print to work seamlessly with the digital communications, and one can trigger the other in any order, because we know customer journeys can happen at any time of day in any order. There's no linear customer journey anymore where you pop people in the top of a funnel and 10% comes out the bottom. And I think the technology, whilst Canon's a technology company, and it's the same for all of our peers in the industry, that those clever technologies enable those applications, enable them to be produced in a way that serves the need and taps into those opportunities. So I think whether you think about technology first, and I know at every show we go to, it's the first thing our customers want to see. They want to see the big grey box and what it can do and the print quality. There's a destructive element. Can I rip this? Can I scratch it? Can I break it in some way? So whatever your start point or interest, I think in the end it's about how is that technology enabling the access to new opportunities that we now understand and can also proactively take to the print buyer. Because I think back to the start of this conversation, it's one thing for us to all know the cool things that print can do, but communicating it to people outside who have a vested interest, who are desperate to connect with their customers in communications campaigns, they really crave advice and expertise about formats and finishing and what's working today versus what worked last year. So I think, it's really interesting to be able to connect the drivers of change and opportunity with the technologies that enable them.
And I think that's where Print Island really came from in my head originally, and now many people's heads. Now we've got an awful lot of people involved, as you know, in the content that's being created for the industry. The whole notion that you've just highlighted there is that actually the customer here is the end user of the output that the PSP or whoever is creating. And I know that the PSP is your customer, and I get that. But is there a case, do you think, because it's really interesting that you mentioned about the big grey box, because every time I walk into a print show anywhere in the world, I'm met with not quite, but largely the same layout. And there's a lot of big grey boxes, and everybody's going, look at me, look at me, look at me. And I get that, and I get that the model of the OEM, whoever they may be, is to sell that kit to the PSP and highlight to the PSP what that kit can do for their customers. So is the onus on you there to communicate down to the third party, or is the onus on the PSP? I don't know. But is there a case here maybe that one of these trade shows should actually be a consumer show where you almost join forces and produce the stuff that these wonderful grey boxes can do, and let people go, oh, I had no idea. Because whenever you hear people talk about print, they go, what, you mean newspapers? No, that's not what I mean at all. And I saw recently you did a brilliant piece with Debbie McKeegan about kitting out. I think it was a retail unit somewhere in Europe. I can't remember the details. You can tell me, but we have to bring to people's attention what print is all about, and it isn't just newspapers, don't we?
No, exactly. I think there's a great onus on the OEM vendors to be able to use our, as big companies with a broad reach, to be able to use that power to inspire the print buyers and our customer. Because yes, our customers who purchase technology are the print service providers. But I think there's also an incredible amount of knowledge in those print service providers. Many years of expertise, many years of pushing the limits of their technologies to do really cool, unique things. And it's a constant education program. You can't just tell your brand customer once, here's all the amazing things we do. You look at the transient workforce that's in many organizations today, and brands, have the same challenge. People come and go. So print buyers will come and go. The young guns will come in from a marketing point of view or product management point of view, and they can make an impact. But I think it's constantly up to us as the OEMs, but also the print service providers, to constantly educate about what is possible with print, from the basis of really understanding the needs of those print buyers. And I think the example you probably mention is a retailer in Germany called Poco. They have close to 200 stores in Germany, and it's a very large home furnishings and home decor retail organization. And whilst they have a huge online presence, more than 90% of their sales happen in a store. So everything they do around communications is about bringing people into the store, engaging with them digitally, and then when they come into the store, they would then make their purchases for their home. And we introduced Poco to some digital print techniques for wallpaper, for textured print, and different applications that they could use in a store. And it would just started off as a conversation around communications, and because they also produce a magazine to hundreds of thousands of customers on a list. So you could say an old technology of print, but actually it's really popular as a way to leaf through the latest trends in home decor and other things. And we introduced them to a handful of applications, and their creative team really took it to heart. And they said, oh, we can make our displays kind of interactive. So they had, a drawer in a piece of furniture had a sticker on that said "Open me," and inside the drawer was textured printing that was like snacks and sweets, and so it was all just a part of being engaging and in the store to create a bit of interaction just over. Here's some furniture set out how we imagine a small living space could be, and they've really taken it to heart, and it's become something that I think will continue to develop. But for us, that's just one tiny example of how we've tried to inspire a potential end user that can have a massive benefit. Because if they were to do something in 180 stores, they could very easily measure the impact of that print. Because everybody wants to measure their marketing spend constantly all the time. They can measure the impact of print and say, yeah, this particular element's working. Perhaps this element could be done slightly differently. They can link that to campaigns in terms of how they got people to the store, and then what was the result of the interactions they had or the in-store experience they had. So I think one tiny example, but yeah, it's something that we can do that can also inspire our customers, inspire the print service providers to have similar conversations with their customers too, and say, have you thought about the way you do to challenge the brief, not just take a print job and print it. Challenge the brief. What are you trying to achieve from this? Because we think you could do it slightly differently.
No, agreed. And I guess when you put into context that the two things that have changed probably the most in the industry in the last 10, 15 years, print on demand. And then as a result, the sort of the equation has changed with the consumer from supply and demand to demand and supply. And that's moved the dial considerably. And then, of course, the final piece, which we all live in this world now, is consumers buy with their eyes. So, we can't just tell them about things. We have to show them things as well. And I just wonder, and we mentioned before we started the recording today about the need for trade shows to evolve. And I wonder whether part of that evolution is to bring consumers in, go and grab them off the street as they walk past the various messes around the world. And say, did you know? Because, one of my goals, Matt, as a speaker, has always been for the audience to leave the room, hopefully when I finished, with the thought, I hadn't thought of it that way. And I guess as the curious creatures that we are as human beings, we need to be led towards that curiosity. And I think this is, and I keep going on about this, and I make no apology for it. I think this is where the print industry has to improve its external comms because there is so much there that you could do. You've just touched on a very, very small part of it, but an enormous market. Because think of this from an IKEA perspective. They were the first ones that came into retail and started to show you what your room could look like. They did the design for you, but they showed it to you. They didn't try and explain it. And I think with wallpaper is just one example. And I know, of course, as you do, how many other examples there could be. For me, I think there's an opportunity here that the industry isn't quite grasping.
Yeah, and I think you raise a good point, and you've raised an extra level of the recipient of a piece of print, the consumer of products or services that a brand is, or a company is using print to communicate with. So I think there's a perception at that consumer level of, is print sustainable? And I think we know as an industry, print is a very sustainable. But there's a perception that perhaps if I get a piece of print, is that somehow tapping into my concerns about sustainability? The same thing for the print buyers and the producers of print who are using it to communicate. It would be amazing to have an event where you could attract on a large scale. I mean, they happen on smaller scales all over, but I think attract on a large scale and really say, look, here is what possible is print. Here's the way that you can use your data to very powerfully create personalized and therefore sustainable, communication campaigns that can be measured. It's not about millions of direct mail, but actually now very targeted so that each one has a much higher level of impact and therefore it's a more sustainable. It's not the spray and pray marketing of the past. And I think, it would be amazing to have that kind of event.
Because my way into the industry in 2015 was the Share a Coke campaign, which at the time utilized that personalized label to great effect as a communication tool with a whole generation around the world. What's interesting to me is they've brought that back 11 years later, largely in the same format that it was, but with one extra ingredient which didn't exist back then, which is TikTok. And of course, the next generation that they're trying to communicate with, they've had to change the way they communicate because the generation has changed. So they're kind of making my point for me in the sense that we can't just rely on, but that's the way we've always done it. The industry need to keep pace with the consumer's desire to see and receive something that a PSP could make, that your machinery could create, and so on and so forth. The game has changed, except it hasn't. In essence, we've got to play a slightly different game, haven't we?
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And I think there's a generational impact in this evolution of the way we're behaving as consumers. On the one hand, especially with the younger generations, there's much more conscious consumerism because people align themselves to brands and products and services, and particularly with brands with whom they share common values. At the same time, there's kind of a social media driven hyper consumerism on TikTok or Facebook or Instagram or any of those platforms. You can buy stuff instantly, see it and buy it. So I think those two things are somewhat of a paradox. But I think At the same time, when many of us, and particularly the younger generations, are spending so much time online, working, being entertained, learning and being educated and communicating with friends, but also through work. It's a huge amount of time online, and therefore, what you project online, it's almost part of your identity and your status. And I think you can then see the way that brands can use that to be able to use print as a physical item to cut through all of that kind of digital noise and digital traffic to not only communicate about just their products, but they're now having to communicate their brand values because of the much more conscious consumers who are aligning themselves towards brands. So almost your behavior online becomes part of your status and identity. Who you're aligning to is all part of that, and that's something that print can play, a great role in how it's kind of premiumized. But I think also with that, much more of a virtual world today for all those reasons, I just mentioned, there's a premiumization of print because it's expected that we will, with much more time at home or remote working, we will actually seek out physical interactions as more special occasions. So a physical piece of print or a physical product or digitally produced packaging that is now personalized to me and it's part of that communications journey, not just a package that ensures it arrives, safely and protected. That's now part of a communications journey. And this then is helping to build trust and loyalty as one of the elements of a touch point that a brand has, but also seeking out physical experiences. Maybe you don't go to stores as often, but when you do, and again, this is partly an expectations of consumers for good experience and curated and more personalized experiences. When you do go to a store, there's opportunities for retailers to have really thought about what is the journey from the moment you enter that store, what's the ambience that's been created, how does the signage and wayfinding support a pleasant journey to find what you were looking for, how does decor play a role in matching the brand campaign that you saw online with actually the experience in store. And it's kind of this seamless journey between remote and physical experiences. And again, these are all the kind of opportunities that we, as a question, we talk to our customers and think about, how do you see it in your business? How are your customers reacting to the changes of the consumers? And therefore, how can we use print in new and interesting ways?
It's ironic, isn't it, that in the space of 20 years, the advent of digital marketing that came along and digital print at sort of the same time, and it was felt at the time as though that would utterly revolutionise the way that we market to people. Within that 20 years, the physical piece of print has become the new luxury. And I remember or the luxury to receive. I remember sitting at Canon at the demo center at Poing. I think it was just after COVID, and I was interviewing Gordon Young from The Drum. And I think you had just done a campaign where actually the winners or the competitors received a physical bit of print, and the reaction that they got was off the charts in terms of, oh my God, this is mine. That's gone full circle in 20 years, hasn't it? That the physical piece of collateral has come back in terms of its value point.
Yeah, you're right. And I think for every period of revolution, whether it's industrial revolution or digital transformation or other business transformations, there's always this big, I suppose, wave of change that feels like it's going to come. But actually, when it actually settles, there's always much more of a balanced approach. So, yes, a few years ago, you could see, oh, wow, email communications, digital comms, print won't exist in quite the same way. But now, as humans who interact and touch things, we exist in a physical space, not in pixels. We appreciate that, and the ability of print to be able to cut through, to have that premium. I mean, I never get bored of seeing print happen. Maybe I'm a print nerd too much, but whether it's you can see an amazing piece of photo and fine art, well lit on beautiful media, and it's like, wow, that image is something else. But seeing it printed in that way equally is something else. But I think a piece of packaging or a student seeing the poster they've designed for a campaign in a physical piece of print It's quite something, and there is a connection to that. You're vested in the design of something, you've thought about it, and then to see it off the screen in physical form at A0, it's like, wow, there's definitely
Yeah,
something there. Maybe I can't
yeah.
explain what those are.
And maybe it's unexplainable, and maybe that's where the mystique sits, is because it's a tangible item, but it's an intangible feeling, and I think that's quite a nice, again, a little bit of mystery to add value back into the whole product chain.
Yeah. But also, we're now evangelizing print fully within an island about how great it is. But yeah, to your point, how do we get this story out there? Because this story is going to evolve, it's going to change, it's going to be different, better. It'll be done differently. There'll be new opportunities, and I think the core the core challenge we have is to get this in front of as many people as possible.
And that's largely the mission of Print Island is to gather these conversations, these debates, these discussions, and then broadcast them beyond the realm of the island, which was always the plan, so that people that don't live on the island could go, oh, I didn't know that, and we're back to that point. Listen, Matthew, I can't let you go. You talked about the Industrial Revolution there. Let's call it the Industrial Evolution. I can't let you go from the Lighthouse, which is designed to give a 360-degree view of the industry, without your thoughts on where we're at the moment with the tariff debate. It seems to be, you mentioned AI as the hot topic. I would say tariff, which has an A and an I in it, by the way, is equally a hot topic. What do you think, personally, professionally? What you mentioned about the generational change and it settles down. Any sign yet that it's going to settle down?
Yeah, we can only hope, can't we? And I think from a Canon point of view, that Canon Europe, who I represent, we of course keeping a very close eye on what is happening there and for impact. It doesn't directly impact us in such huge ways, but I think it's one of the macroeconomic headwinds that if it wasn't that, I'm sure it would be something else.
Yes.
And I think in the end, as we said before, there is always this concept and concern about change that in the end we all hope that it settles down and we manage our businesses as everybody did within the COVID period. There was a huge talk about pivoting your business to something else, and there's some amazing stories about what happened in that time. And I've no doubt with the print industry's staying power, innovation, creativity, and all of those skills we have, that the industry will find its way through any of the next upcoming challenges that we have. But I think, as we touched on earlier, these challenges always somewhere in the line, even in a small way, bring some opportunities. So I think that's what I'm hanging on to. So.
Yeah, no, good, very wise. Grip on tight, I think, is the best advice I can give you. And of course, as you said before, it's a 1,000-year-old industry. It's been through all sorts, over the years, and the current tenant, shall we call him, in the White House, won't be there forever. We hope so. Yeah. Listen, Matt, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure to chat to you, as it always is. And thank you for joining me on Print Island here at the Lighthouse. Look forward to very much seeing you at some of the events coming up this autumn. I know it's a busy show schedule for you coming up this autumn. You'll also find out, ladies and gentlemen, that you'll never see us in the same room, because we are essentially the same person. But thank you.
It's really pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Great. Thanks ever so much for your time. Have a great weekend.